All right, today we're gonna make some walnut date scones. They're delicious, and I am often asked for this recipe, so I'm excited to share it with you today. My name is Shelly Witzke. We're gonna get started. In here, I have I have all of my flour. It's half whole wheat and half white. And they're both organic, it doesn't have to be. All right. The thing that we have to do is we have to get our dates in there and all smooshed in so we don't have big chunks. The other thing we have to do is we have to cut in our butter while their butter is still cold. So I'm gonna get one of my favorite tools for cutting up butter, and we'll just put that at the ready. And what we're gonna start with is putting the dates in there. And so now I have two different kind of dates here today to use, and what I've noticed is that the Medjools, so that I have Medjools and I have dulce de leche, and that was the Medjool. You can see how soft it is. It's really nice and soft. There's so much sugars in there. The dulce de leches are also soft. They're a little smaller and they're not quite as moist. So what I'm going to do is I'm pulling out the pit and I'm taking off the little stem end, and I'm just going to throw those in there. You can see how nice and soft they are. There's no stem end on this one, and pull the pit out. I have purchased dates before. I'm not a big date fan personally, but I love them in here. And then I make a sweet date butter to go with it. They're so good. What was I saying? I was saying that the ones that I've bought in the grocery store just in a package, they're kind of dry and hard, and they're already chopped. They're too dried out. Don't recommend those. If you can get your hands on some Medjools, they're beautiful. Really soft. They're easier to process in a food processor as well. I've done this in my big stand mixer. That's how I used to do it, and I've started using my food processor. So let's see how we do today, because this is kind of sticky. So I'm trying to use up these ones. They're much stickier than I'd like. And again, you want to take all those little wee stem ends off. And so the quantities are, there's a cup and a half of all-purpose flour and a cup and a half of white flour. Then I have a cup of dates. So here we go. Nice and sticky. I'm going to do my best with this. All right, so this is going to take a little bit of getting going, because there's a lot to work with. So just give it a second. So what we're doing is we're kind of breaking down the dates and smooshing them in with the flour. We're going to add the rest of the ingredients in a moment. I want to get this as smooth as I can, so just bear with us. You can hear the difference as it's going through those dates and hitting them. I'm just listening. That's sounding helpful. Let's check it out. So there's chunks like that. So I'm not going to get too far in there. All right, well, I'm going to put the rest of the dry ingredients in. So I'm going to add my sugar, my salt. So I have a half a cup of sugar, dark brown, or I have an organic cane, half of a teaspoon. and then a couple of tablespoons, so actually 2 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2, or 8 teaspoons. And then we're going to put also a teaspoon of cinnamon. So this is my favorite cinnamon, cringy, if you can get it. Okay, let's give this another little process, see if I can get it on here. I am like the most mechanically challenged person you'll ever meet. Just have to put it on just like this, see? It's really easy. Except for if you're a person like me, oh my word, this is too funny. Is it just too heavy? Am I nervous? Okay, I think it was pushed down a little bit much. All right. Okay, here we go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add we're going to cut in the 1 cup of cold butter. So because we're making, it's like a scone, we want it to be cold. And so we're going to cut this and see how nicely the crinkle cutter cuts this and it doesn't stick to the blade. I love this for cutting up butter. All right, get this going, and then we'll throw in the butter. I can see it in here. It looks really good. All right, so that just took a lot of the work out of it. So what we're gonna do is dump this into a bowl because it's just gonna be a little bit easier to deal with. Sorry. Out here. We're also going to use the same food processor to chop our walnuts. So now I have toasted them, and so now they have this beautiful aroma. You can see I used the air fryer to toast them all. I didn't overdo it, which I sometimes do, admittedly. But they're gonna bake a little bit longer, and so I wanna slightly underdo them if I can. And let's put this back together and we'll toss them together. Beautiful. Oh, and you always know, like if you don't normally toast your walnuts when you're baking, start doing it. Unless it's going to get a lot of open air in the oven and going to toast in the oven. If it's already in the baking, it's not going to toast. And you'll get so much more flavor, and it will, it's just, the aroma coming out of here is so lovely. Okay, see them? What a difference. Just for having them toasted. So let's finish this off and get these going. This is really, I hope you're finding this easy. I think baking, you know, there's a few, there's some science to baking. Oh, there's a chunk of butter that I didn't get. Okay, so if that happens, you can squish it in through the butter with your, or through the flour. What you're trying to do is coat the flour as much as you can with butter. I missed a piece. So what I'm doing is I'm getting and I don't want to melt the butter or soften it. I still want it to stay cold. So this is one of the things about baking scones is, and same with pastry, you want the water in the butter. Did you know that there's water in butter? There's fat and water in butter, and normally fat and butter don't mix, or fat and water don't mix, right? If you think about them in liquid form, which is why you want it to stay in solid form so that they stay mixed. Because when I know that kind of blew my mind when I learned it. So butter is actually an emulsification. And so there's multiple reasons, but anyways, when you put the your baked goods in the oven and it hits the heat, the water in the butter will turn to steam, and the steam will kind of puff it up a little bit, and that's how you get flaky layers in your pastries. So that's why you never want to melt your butter. Okay, you want to keep it in that emulsified state. The other thing that happens is if you add water to flour, it comes like glue. You can actually make an old-fashioned glue. And it's just really glommy and yucky. And so when you coat the flour with fat or butter, it actually protects it a little bit from getting gluey like that and makes it nice and tender, which is the other reason we want to coat the butter and flour together, or coat the flour with butter. Okay, so you can see what I'm dealing with. So it's crumbly, there's chunks of butter, like flat, and then there's chunks of that word that I'm trying to say, chunks of dates and walnuts. That's why this is so good. The cinnamon, so delicious. Okay, what we're gonna do next is get some buttermilk going. And we want about 1.5 cups. And I say about because buttermilk, actually I should have shaken that. This is organic buttermilk. It does separate a bit. Yeah, that was a mistake. Okay, since this was just brand new, I'm gonna put that back in there. It's gonna be thicker. I should have shaken it. Okay, you can see it's definitely thicker. It's harder to read the measurements. I think that's about there. So buttermilk is thicker than regular milk. And so if you're substituting with milk, you'll find you'll use a little bit less. Okay, so we just really want to stick this together. And you can see that I'm not like stirring vigorously, I'm just kind of nudging it, suggesting that it kind of sticks together. And if it's a little too dry, then I can add just a little bit more. And next, what we're gonna do is put this out on a pastry mat and fold it together. So here is how I do it. And I don't, purport to be the best baker in the world, but man, these are good and they're not as hard as you might think. All right, here we go. All this goodness out of there. So I'm trying to touch this as little as possible with my hands because my hands are warmer than the butter, and I don't want to melt the butter. So you can see I don't have this mixed super evenly. Let me just turn the camera down a teensy bit if I can. I'm not doing that very well. Okay, so I'll pull this back. So I'm gonna use the edges of my pastry mat and let it do some of the work. And I'm going to knead this together until I can see that it's nicely mixed. And I'm gonna kind of make layers, if you will. That looks, I do say so myself, that looks pretty good. I'll use a little scraper, a bench scraper, to make sure that I have everything. I think it's good. A little bit more dry over there. Let's move that in. One of the things, you know, that I think when we're cooking, baking, especially baking, if it doesn't turn out exactly like we expect, we think we're a bad baker. When in fact, someone taught me years ago that being a pastry chef is 90% knowing how to fix mistakes. So if that resonates with you, take hope. It's just like, oh, if that didn't go exactly how you wanted, then how can you adapt and how can you fix it? And that's all you want to do. That looks really nice and moist. So now all we're gonna do is shape these. I like them in squares. You can do them in whatever shapes you like. Sometimes it's fun to do them in, like do the whole thing in a circle. And then cut them into like little wedges. So I'm just gonna grab some flour to dust this. So it's not gonna stick so badly to my mat, my pastry mat. Again, instead of getting my hands on there, I'm using the mat and my handy scrapers. Here we go. And so I'm just gonna nudge these into a shape that I want. In this case, a rectangle. So that's how, you know, if you start it consistent, then when you're done, you're gonna end up with consistent results. So I'm just gonna cut this into squares. Use a more accurate cutter. And I'm gonna bake it in the oven nice and hot on my stoneware. Try and be even. Again, if you were in a bakery and you had to make money at this, then you're gonna measure so that you know they're all the same size. If you're like me, you're just gonna pick the biggest one off the plate when it's time to serve it, and you're gonna serve it up with sweet date butter as well. I'll do another video on that. All right, so then these are just gonna be put on my stone, and we're gonna bake those in the oven. How is that? How easy. So nice hot oven, so we get nice layers, we get it to brown. I cannot wait to eat these. All right, I hope you try them. I'll share pictures as well.